Welcome to this human life, and more specifically, we're going to be talking about what matters most. To help unravel those three simple words, what matters most, I'm delighted to invite Lyn Smith. I think it's fair to say that Lyn and I know each other fairly well, in fact, very well. But I'll leave Lyn to introduce herself and to elaborate on that. So, without further ado, very, very warm welcome. What matters most?
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here and enjoy having a conversation with you over this human life podcast.
So, any thoughts around, like I said, on the surface of it, just three very simple words, what matters most, but really it's an umbrella for so much stuff. And I know when you and I spoke off air, we said, well, okay, well, how can we narrow that down? And we sort of stumbled on the word injustice, didn't we? And I think that's probably a good way to well, certainly for yourself to come in and unravel what you want to unravel under that umbrella of injustice.
Yeah, I think for me, looking back, I think at the time you don't necessarily join the dots, but for me, there has been both personal injustices and obviously local, national, and world injustices that we're witnessing to all the time, aren't we? But for me
Mm.
personally, my main one that affected me stemmed from a couple of really nasty childhood experiences where, for want of, I don't know whether you how much you want me to go into any stories around what happened, but just say that I'm a two-time sexual assault survivor, and I didn't actually, in that moment, report it. And this was going back to the 1970s. I was only in my teens at the time, two different guys, two different situations. And I remember that I literally was going to be going through and planned to go through the university system because I had got thoughts around becoming a veterinarian, and that didn't happen because my education got totally disruptive. Sort of went off the rails a little bit, if you like, in terms of academia, and left school, um, with not sufficient qualifications, and then later, funnily enough, joining the police force at the age of 19 because looking back now, I think the motivation and inspiration for that was I didn't get justice for myself. I never told anybody about it. In fact, I didn't tell anybody about it or report it until I was 42 years old.
Mm.
So for me, um, my motivation and inspiration for joining the police force was if I couldn't get justice for myself, then maybe I can get justice for others. As it turned out, I was sadly disappointed regarding my experience, but there was good and bad within the police force at that time in the UK. But certainly I did come away from that career path disillusioned, let's say.
Yeah. So just to come in on your comment there about, I'm paraphrasing now, how deep, shall I go? That's entirely your own choice. That's entirely your own choice because the whole part or purpose, shall I say, of these conversations, we're not going to shy away from the truth. And, we do face things head on because there's a lot of horrible stuff that happens in the world, isn't there? A lot of horrible stuff. And I think it's only by opening up the conversations and being, having constructive dialogue. And that's not always an easy place, is it? Particularly, when it's raw, straight after or relatively shortly after the event. It takes time to heal, if indeed some people never heal. So I just sort of set the scene there for not only yourself, Lyn, but future guests to say, listen, this is your space. You put on the table what you want to put on the table. Let's open up the conversation around injustices. I can see a beautiful black feline in the background, who I know, I was going to say I know personally. I have that pleasure. So yeah, just to elaborate on that. in terms of the police force, then, when you was in a position, some might say, to do even more about it because you was in the system, so to speak. You was a serving officer, um, but you didn't go down that route, did you?
Well, I suppose I did to a degree. I mean, I was only in the police force for 5 years, and within that time, I did at the time do some work with women that had been through serious sexual assault. So I did, my due diligence around that. But what really shocked me, especially as a survivor myself, was that there was quite a lot of false claims in relation to that, which I hadn't sort of contemplated that, that wasn't what I was expecting at all to see women making up allegations around that and potentially putting men behind bars who are absolutely innocent and were only guilty of probably having a fling, and the woman wanting to cover that up because they was already in a relationship or married or whatever, for whatever reason. There was
Mm.
various reasons why women made those claims, and usually because they'd had a drunken one night stand or something like that. And I could literally tell and feel who were the genuine ones that were telling the truth and who were the ones that, were trying to pull the wool over our eyes, let's say. And it was quite shocking to me to see the stats around the amount of women that were making these claims that were false. And so that was very disheartening, very, very disheartening.
I
And,
should
it's a bit of
imagine.
a slap in the face for those that have genuinely been through that.
Yeah, and I can only assume because when people say, "Well, I kind of understand," and obviously you're very well placed to comment on this. Do we really? I mean, I think we can try and empathise, and certainly as a guy, although sexual assault isn't a binary thing. It doesn't just happen to women, does it? But you kind of got a double whammy there, didn't you? On a personal level, you'd been assaulted, seriously assaulted twice. And then on a professional level, the system let you down because of, well, actually, that's another thing altogether. But like you say, let's hold that thought then. The system let you down. But then before that, actually, you'd got women that were just basically making it up. So, I mean, it was just, I don't know. I don't even know where to start with that.
I certainly didn't foresee that being a reality, that I'd meet in those scenarios. It was a real wake-up call for me because I was really shocked, that a woman could do that. It was really, really, really painful to experience that, and as I say, it was a bit of a slap in the face for those women that genuinely do go through such a serious trauma as that. And I suppose the other thing around I suppose, culture at the time when it did happen to me in the sort of mid to late 70s was that um, I didn't feel able to speak about it. In I don't know whether it was just a sign of the times, but I think a lot of women who went through those particular assaults during that period and probably a few decades after didn't feel like they had a voice. I
Mm.
certainly as well didn't have a close relationship with either of my parents where I felt as though I could even tell them about it. So it's something that got really suppressed for quite a few decades. And, the fact that that was a situation from a young girl's perspective, I didn't feel I could tell anybody, was also, looking back, an injustice, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. As I say, as a person, as a human being, I mean, I can't imagine the specifics of it. I don't think anyone can. I think everybody's got their own unique take upon, how they manage that situation. But I mean, you had it twice, then you'd got your fellow women sort of making these things up. And was there, I mean, what I made the some might say, assumptive statement that the system failed you. Now, I know that because of conversations that we've had. For the listeners' benefit, Lynn and I were partners for 10 years. So I think it's fair to say that, we know one or two things about each other. This is not a cold sort of conversation, so to speak. So on that note of the system failed, I mean, do you think in that context that, did the system fail with genuine cases, or not, as the case may be?
Absolutely. And yeah, you can see worldwide it is still failing women. It is still failing women. Not only I can understand why women don't report it because A, are you going to be believed if it genuinely has happened to you? B, um, you're going to have to relive it all, probably multiple times by the conversations you have with police officers, medical professionals, as well as in the courtroom. And C, you see such um, trivial slaps on the wrist given to the perpetrators.
Mm, yeah,
So, it's horrible to see even today women not getting justice, even though we got probably more of a voice these days. I just see failures where the judicial system is concerned and also within the police force itself.
yeah. I mean, as you know, I've had literally countless conversations on a whole myriad of topics, and this is not an unusual one. And one of the comments that's kind of semi-consistently at least come back to me is, how can a guy interview? Because he doesn't know, he hasn't got that empathy, he hasn't got that understanding. I mean, was that your experience when you was in the force, albeit many years ago, that male officers actually dealt with female assaults?
Yeah, I mean, there was a particular department, that was primarily women that dealt with sexual assaults, which did get women referred to, but initially, had male officers initially probably been the ones to refer, survivors to that department. But I did feel that, a lot of guys didn't understand at all and were very not empathetic or sympathetic in any way, shape, or form. And even domestic violence in those days was just shrugged off as, oh, it's a domestic dispute, civil matter, and not taken very seriously. And we all know, the stats on that are women are murdered every week, in their most intimate relationships behind closed doors, on the back of, a string of domestic violence
Yeah.
reports.
So if we look back at the past then, I mean, like I say, at an early age, they were two horrific experiences to have to deal with. I think they'd be horrific experiences to have to deal with at any age, irrespective. But my point I'm trying to make is at such an early age where you've arguably not got the balance of life experiences. It's like, 18, you've undergone those two two horrific experiences, and you've got nothing else to kind of weigh it against, because what life do we really know after 18 years? I would argue relatively nothing, although at 18 I thought I knew everything. um,
Well, the first one happened at 15, and I was
mm,
actually a virgin at that time as well. So that was my first sexual experience, if you like,
yeah.
at the hands of a very dangerous man. Um, and that did affect my future relationships, most definitely. And it also, I think, affects your nervous system, and you're almost, without even realizing, living life on high alert all the time, and that puts stress on your body, and you don't realize that the health implications that that might have, um, and also the the mind can block things out. There's lots of memories that I've read about now that we delete from our childhoods because the mind wants to protect you. It's one of the ways it protects you from any trauma, and that could be a big trauma, with a big T, or a little trauma with a little t. But it just blocks things out from your memories. So if you are somebody that can't remember a lot of things from your childhood, it's probably connected to something, that you may have experienced, whether that be a big T or a little t. But also, it's a case of the mind will block it out, but the body remembers. And the body is what holds on to stuff and reacts to stuff without you even realizing that it is doing. So you might watch, I don't know, a TV program that has something graphic that relates to what happened to you, and you might not think it's actually doing anything to you internally, but your body remembers, and it probably is doing something without you even consciously being aware of that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, in different contexts, completely different context, I can relate to that, definitely relate to that. So obviously, you had these early years, horrific experiences. How does it make you feel when, and I'm going to really play devil's advocate here and say, ignorant people like me use words like violated? Is that appropriate language? Because you
Yeah,
hear so much to say that, well, I'm not a rape victim, I'm a rape survivor. And I just use that as a kind of a parallel example because I know, the word I've just used is a strong word. How do you react when you hear those kinds of words?
I think it's
Violate.
very appropriate. I think that's perfect. Perfectly sums up what happens when you go through that trauma. Is you do feel violated, but you also take on, obviously not consciously, but the shame and the humiliation that goes with that as well, which
Yeah.
obviously belongs to the perpetrator, not to you.
Mm. Okay, so that was kind of where the seed was planted. So, what space do you find yourself in present day? Because I want to look at present day and get a snapshot of that, and then I want to kind of close out by looking at the future. Well, actually, I want to close out by naming one or two other things which we won't go into, other subjects which we know are very close to your heart, and some might say are as a direct result of what we're talking about. But that's for another time, another place. So, present day, where do you find yourself with these? How your life's moved on.
I feel like I've had to do a hell of a lot of work on myself. I've been in the personal development space for over 20 years now, and that has helped massively, not only investing in myself to heal my own stuff, but also teaching it and helping others. So that sort of gets reinforced, I suppose, um, because whilst you're teaching, you're also helping yourself to heal as a byproduct of that continually. And we've said before, you're never fully sorted. There are going to be things that, whether you're conscious of it or not, that might trigger you internally or externally if we actually physically react to something. And that might be on the back of a past, usually childhood experience. And we don't logically think at the time that actually, why did I react to that in that way? And usually, if we self-analyze, it's because you've been triggered. And what's triggered that? You know, um, Maybe something that's been dormant and buried within you for decades. And it might even be, I saw a woman actually, it was interesting. She posted on Facebook saying that she got a lovely boyfriend, and in all ways he was great. The only thing that she found troubling was that the fact that he was quite loud and quite flamboyant. And she says for some reason that triggered her, and I actually responded to her saying, well, maybe something in your childhood, you know, is being triggered, because maybe, I don't know whether your parents had conflict or whatever, but maybe just the sound of somebody having a loud voice could be something that's triggering you, that letting you know that something needs to be healed. So,
Mm.
that was just my personal take on it. Whether it was right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't know. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously you're helping people now, that have had kind of similar experiences. If you could get your kind of crystal ball out and create this or the proverbial magic wand for the future, what would that look like? For young women and girls, because I assume that, and one should never assume, but I am going to assume on this occasion in this context that we're talking about the female gender, rather than sort of people generally, because men do have obviously, are not immune to then always the perpetrator. But what would you say to people going forward? You've got this magic wand and been granted one wish. What would that look like for the future of people? Or you decide actually not so much people, but young girls and women. What would that be like for you?
I would hope that women and girls get the same-sex rights across the world as that they actually need, that are, totally given to the male population, and the sex-based rights I'm on about, and that we are actually treated equally in terms of being able to give women our own, and girls our own private spaces and places that are totally sex-based, based on us being women, adult human females or girls.
Mm,
And I just have strong feelings around that, obviously, because of my own personal experiences. And I just want a world whereby, common sense prevails, because we need those spaces. Men probably don't understand, because they've never been a woman, that, right from a very young age, once we start going through puberty, which can be like 10, 11, 12, we're being sexualized, we're being looked at differently by men, older men, whether that's teenage boys, even our fathers, other family members. Um, and, we're conscious of that. And that can feel quite threatening and intimidating and confusing. And so no wonder, a lot of girls struggle with puberty, and a lot of girls probably dislike being girls because they don't feel safe in their own bodies, and they probably don't understand at that age why they don't feel safe. So, for me, it's about making a safer world for our young girls, and for our women.
beautiful. Just as we started on the word injustice, I think it's fair to say, correct me if I'm wrong, that we've ended in a place with another word, inequality. And I think that will make for a very, very, knowing, exactly what you're, well, not exactly, but some of the things that you feel very strongly about. I think that one word provides a very solid foundation for maybe coming back and talking to us about that, and you're sharing your views, because I think the world does need to hear them, not just your views, but all, this balanced view of society. Let's get the conversation out in the open, because there's a lot of so-called taboo subjects, isn't there? And I'm not saying that this is one of them. I'm not framing it that way, but there are a lot of stuff that we shouldn't be talking about. But my personal take upon it, and the purpose of this human life channel is, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's bring these issues out in the open. And so, any final thoughts then before we sign off? And I just ask you to share some sort of contact details where, if you want to be contacted, people can reach out to you, find out more about you, that kind of thing. Any final words?
I just think, it's healthy to debate things. I think it's horrible, that free speech is being shut down quite a bit, and that's having a negative impact on the world and women and girls as well. So I do think it's healthy to have debate. And you don't necessarily have to agree with each other, but at least allow somebody else to have another opinion, and
Yeah.
respect it. That's just my final words. And as regards contact, best contact information I can offer is Lyn at hearts-entwined.com is my email, and also the name of my podcast as well is Hearts Entwined.
Hearts Entwined. That's Lyn, Lyn, isn't it?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So there we have it, viewers and listeners. Immense gratitude to Lyn for sharing those moments. And as I say, we can only hope that by bringing issues like this out into the fore, that the world does become a better place.
Thank you.